All right, we're going to talk a bit about strategies in terms of selling your company. As I said, we're a quorum group. We've been in the business since 1985. We only represent privately held companies that are selling, and we only represent software companies or related technology companies. Our headquarters are in Seattle and Zurich. We have offices throughout the world, and we're in the process of setting up operations here in Asia. Our approach to selling a company is to get the optimal outcome, which I'll discuss in a minute. We approach it from a team perspective, so there are a number of people and there's a lot of work to be done to sell your company. We're also the largest tech M&A educator in the world, and we have the largest database of buyers out there. So it's critical that in terms of finding the right buyer for your company, you need to have a wide look at who those buyers might be, and most of those buyers will typically be cross-border. About 60% of the deals that we do are cross-border deals, so you need to search outside. We've sold more software-related firms than anyone in the business. So let's move on. What are international buyers looking for today? Well, first of all, they're looking for market growth. They're looking for market position. They want to see where you are in a market, and they want to see if they can replicate that in other markets, other geographical markets or other software markets. The next is they're looking at the organization. You're looking at the leadership and the talent and the skills that you have in the organization. And third, they're looking at your financial. The financial is important, but is not as important in game companies as it is in other companies. In game companies, the buyers out there are looking for leverage. If they see a game doing really well in Korea and they feel it can do well in the rest of Asia, or they can feel that it can do really well in Europe or in North America, they're going to see greater value in that and push the price of your company up. Some of our, and this is an indication of some of the recent acquisitions or transactions that we've done. And one of the most interesting things here is that there's a lot of what you would consider non-software-based companies buying software companies. So you don't always know who your buyer might be. It may be somebody you've never even heard of. And that is the case this year in video games and games. Mobile gaming specifically, gamification of mobile applications, and so on. And so those buyers are everywhere. They could be advertising companies, they could be consumer-based companies, but they need talent and teams to grow their business. Another example here is a deal we did with Google. This company was one of 7 companies in the business that they were in. When Google bought them, they essentially day 2, they offered the software for free and put the other 6 companies out of business. And that indicates that you need to be aware of the timing and who your competitors are in the business, and be the first to be sold to the company, because a company like that can come along and basically change the whole market for you. Here's some other. This is a deal we did in Japan. All these deals are worldwide. We also worked with Korea on OlaWorks, which we sold to Intel, and so on. So I'm going to give you a market perspective and talk about valuations and why M&A is so strong in the gaming industry. The main reason we are doing so much M&A is that we're in have disruptive applications of technology. That's why M&A is so strong in our business, and particularly in the gaming business, because platforms are changing all the time. Technology is changing all the time. How we use games, how we play games, everything is changing. And that means that there are buyers out there that need to get on board quickly to be competitive in their space. One of the things that's driving M&A is excess cash. And I hear this from all of the companies that I talk to about acquiring our clients. They have a ton of cash on board. They've had more cash than they had even 5 years ago. 1,000% more. You look at Apple, you look at Google, and they need to spend that cash. So that's why most deals today, fortunately, are cash deals when an acquisition happens. 10 or 20 years ago, when I was selling my software company, these were stock deals, and you had to wait a year for that stock to be tradable. Now they're cash deals with retention bonuses and all sorts of other incentives for you to be on board. I mentioned this last time, top strategic acquirers, Google and Facebook being the most notable ones here. We're seeing Yahoo jumping up tremendously here. I think they've done 4 transactions in the game business in the last month and a half. Who would have thought? So how much uncommitted funds do you think strategic buyers have available? Anybody know? Anybody have a guess on how much money, how much cash is out there? 200 million, 300 million? About $350 billion is there ready to be spent on companies for acquisitions. That's a lot of money, a lot of cash, excess cash that can be spent in buying your companies. Here are some of the top private equity acquirers. Private equity companies are entering the business now, and they are buying into game companies, which is remarkable. They were inactive even 4 or 5 years ago. They had tons of cash, but they weren't in the business. Now they're making acquisitions, and we see that with a lot of these private equity companies that will invest in your company, let it grow even more, and then sell it. How much money does private equity have? About $1 trillion. It's how much money they have sitting in the bank waiting to be spent on acquisitions. It's amazing. So here are the top 10 reasons why tech M&A is going to remain strong. First of all, we're seeing extraordinary change, and we're seeing that in our industry with mobile and online games, literally changing the whole landscape of console gaming. Strategic buyers have record cash, as I mentioned. Debt is at no cost. Even though they have cash, they can take debt at literally no cost. So their deals just don't, borrowing money doesn't cost them anything. Private equity with $1 trillion, and a lot of new Asian buyers, particularly in the gaming industry, like I said in my last presentation. They accounted for 7 out of 10 of the biggest transactions in the business last year, the Asian companies. Non-tech buyers, as I mentioned, companies that had never thought about getting in the game business are buying gaming companies, buying gaming studios, buying gaming platforms and technologies. The Jobs Act, this applies specifically to the US, and crowdfunding with Kickstarter, very active in the game space. I know 3 or 4 studios that have raised multiple $1 million through Kickstarter with further titles without giving up any equity. American companies are relatively cheap, and this will continue through 2013, where we'll have Asian buyers moving into the US more aggressively. And most US buyers, if the buyers are US buyers, they have cash overseas. So they use that cash overseas to buy overseas companies. An example of this was Microsoft buying Skype for a lot of money. And obviously in a lot of companies, software is rising in importance. So I see a lot of advertising agencies and media companies stepping up the pace, being involved, needing to find out. They can't do it themselves. They've never had the expertise to build games or gamify any of their applications. So they're buying studios and they're buying technology. Asia is leading the growth here. A lot of technology innovation. Some of the most biggest leaders in the mobile gaming business are in Asia. Expanding IT services, a state of manufacturing we know about, and the growing online media presence is contributing dramatically to the leadership in Asia. So how do you achieve the optimal outcome? How do you get the most? How do you get the most for your company, and what does it mean to get the most for your company? Is it just the cash that goes in? Well, first of all, it is value. How much did you get for the company? How much cash did you get for the company? How much retention bonuses were put in place, employment agreements and that sort of thing. But it's also about creating the best transaction structure. Obviously, cash is the best, but you need to build a structure so that you know you're going to get paid. It used to be that if you're getting paid you could be paid on incentives. If you meet a specific target, then you will get paid. Those are tough deals. Those are deals you should avoid. So you want to put the best structure in place so that you're getting most of your money, if not all of your money up front. Minimizing your risk and liability is a part of that. This is where you get your lawyer involved to make sure that you're not at risk after the deal is done. And reducing your taxes. You need to be talking to your accountant about reducing the taxes when you sell the company. You should be selling the company, not assets in your company. There's huge tax implications for that. If you're selling assets, a piece of your company, the taxes will be dramatically higher than if you sell the whole company. So keep that in mind when you're structuring your organization and what you consider selling. Things like structuring your employment agreements and non-competes. All of this has to be taken into consideration. It's a big deal when keeping your team together and you staying on board. Proper integration. This is where a lot of deals fall apart. After the deal is done, is there a proper integration of the company that just bought you? Think about what you're going to be doing in that company when you get bought. It's very important. We have set up what we call the 8 stages for an optimal outcome, and I'll go through these very quickly. I can send you more detailed documents on this, but preparation is key. Things like making sure that you have some of the due diligence in place ahead of time. Get ready your financials, get ready your presentation materials, set tasks, what you need to do and when, getting ahead of the game. It's very important. I find a lot of the most successful M&A transactions is when the entrepreneur thinks about selling their company the day they start their company. Thinking, what happens when I sell my company? I'm going to build this company. I'm going to eventually sell it. Think about from day one how I would put this company together and what I need to do to make it attractive to a buyer. Do your research. Buyers lists. For any transaction out there, there's at least 80 potential, maybe 100 potential buyers in the game business that are interested in buying you. It's not just 2 or 3. It's not maybe the ones you're doing business with. It's probably somebody you're not doing business with. So think about who is on that buyer list, and that is critical. And approach them in the right way. You're dealing with the proper contact. You need to deal with executives. You're only dealing with the CEO, the CFO of that buying company. You're not dealing with the vice president of product development. You're not dealing with the vice president of marketing when you sell your company. You're dealing with the CEO. Again, I emphasize this contact. How do you make that initial contact with the buyers? It's important that you approach buyers simultaneously. You need to approach 80 to 100 buyers all at the same time. You don't want to approach the first buyer this month, the next buyer next month, and the next buyer the month after, the quarter after that. That delays the process. It does not conducive to bidding on your company, which sends the price of your company up. So you need to simultaneously be approaching the prospective buyers with all at the same time with the same documentation. Discovery. After you've presented an executive summary, which is typically 10 to 12 pages long, and maybe a financial memorandum, which is about the same size, there's an amount of discovery that goes on. Be prepared to talk about your company. Have that first 10-minute call with the CEO of the buyer, and be prepared to deliver that value proposition properly to that buyer in a 10-minute call. There will be further follow-up calls and demonstrations that will last a half an hour or an hour, and there may be an on-site visit, but make sure you have that message clear. Then there's the negotiation, the fun part, which will ultimately end up in a detailed letter of intent. It's not a letter of intent that just says, I'm buying you for $50 million. It's a letter of intent that's going to lay out the whole deal in 3 or 4 or 5 pages. And that will lead eventually to a definitive agreement, which will be the agreement you sign when you sell your company and the cash goes in the bank. Due diligence. Again, this is a rather difficult part of selling your company, so the more prepared you are, the better ahead of time. Make sure your documents are in place. Make sure your financials are in good shape. They're reviewed or audited. Your ownership is clear. all those sorts of things are really, really important. Make sure that while you're going through this process, or preferably well before, you're thinking about getting all that due diligence in place. It'll go quickly if you're prepared. Time is not on your side as a seller. The more time that goes by, the less the buyer may be interested in you. You want to get the deal done quickly, so make sure that due diligence is prepared properly. And finally, the closing. There's reps and warranties. You get your lawyer involved. You determine any holdbacks. You get final opinions from your accountants and lawyers, and you sign the contracts. And then the fun part starts. There's the integration. As I say, most of the time it doesn't go that well, believe it or not. It's tough. There's some examples that you'll see on our sellers panel this afternoon where the integration went really well. There's other things that fell apart. The company lost its way. All the things they said they were going to do for you never happen. And if it's not in writing, it probably won't happen. So all of those things can lead to a rough integration. So try to deal with as many of those integration issues as possible as you determine the deal and before you get the deal completed. In a global search, here's what we found. What percentage of the time will other buyers willing to pay more than the first party that approached you? About 75% of the time, there are higher bidders out there. In the case of my company and one of the companies that I sold, I had the first buyer come to me and they said, Jim, we want to buy your company. The price is X $10 million. Do not talk to any other buyers. Please do not talk. If you talk to other buyers, we're not going to buy you. We're going to walk away. I didn't think this was right. I went to other buyers. I got actually Quorum involved at that time, and we found 9 other buyers very quickly within a matter of a week, and we had them bidding on the company. The price went up by 300%, and the guy that said he wasn't going to buy me if I talked to other players paid that extra 200% on the company, about 3 times what I was supposed to get. Timing in that deal, and every deal is critical. At that time, we were coming up to an E3 show, and I had a great demo of the product in a little booth, and everybody saw my product, and all the bidders were at the table making bids at the show for the company. So timing is important. After that, M&A decreased a lot in that market because it was mostly just PC games, and they had bought what they wanted. Again, very quickly, when you're selling your company, you're dealing with the CEO. You don't need to be talking to anybody else about selling your company. Do not approach, a VP of development or marketing about selling your company. Go straight to the top. I will wrap up in a minute, Yulia. The 5 major benefits of using a professional process. There's a lot of work to be done. You can create a model for your company. You'll have a better company when you go through this process. You'll have a ton of research at hand. You will have so much information on your competitors and on your potential buyers, you won't believe it. It will improve your business even if you don't sell your company. Market feedback, again, you're going to be talking to the CEOs of all the potential buyers out there, and you'll get some real great insight into what's going on. You'll establish relationships within the business that will be long-lasting. I have relationships for 25 years with some of the CEOs of some of the largest game companies as a result of going through the process. And then finally, the exit. Deal disasters. Avoid these things at all costs. The top documents, back up here. Takes about 60 documents, of half of which require professionals to create and go through. The top value destroyers, confidentiality, really critical. This is why you're not dealing with the vice president of product development at your potential acquirer. You're not telling them what your products are or product plans are for the future. You're dealing with the CEO and the corporate development people so that your information is not compromised. 2, theft of technology, not as much now, but again, the buyers at the CEO level and corporate development level, they're interested in buying the company because it adds value to the company. If you're dealing with the product development people, they're interested in getting your technology and not buying you. Loss of staff, wear on CEO and management is huge. You need to still continue to run your company while you're selling your company. Okay? Get others involved to help you sell your company while you continue to grow your business. If you do if you lose focus, then your business will drop off. And of course, going to market too late. I gave you that Google example. If the market is dried up for mobile game developers or mobile platforms or distribution platforms in the business, there's no value to your company. It's very hard to sell a console-based game company these days because all of the major companies that are in the console business have the talent they need to build that product. Deal killers. Number one, I'm going to go through this quickly. Dealing with only one buyer. Who's running the show if you're dealing with one buyer? The buyer. They're going to tell you how much, when, what, where, the whole bit. You need to be dealing with 5 or 6 buyers at the same time making offers. Misalignment. Make sure everybody in your company is on the same page. Have a board meeting. Make sure everybody knows that you're on the same page and what you're planning on doing. You don't want to get to the point where an offer for $35 million on your company and the board didn't even know that you were selling the company. Contact at the wrong level, we've talked about a lot. You need to be dealing with the CEO and the EVP of corporate development. Potential buyers, you don't want to waste time on buyers that are not interested in your company or don't have the ability to buy your company, don't have the cash. And misunderstanding the buyer process. If you don't understand how Google buys, how Microsoft buys, how Big Fish buys, Kabam, Kixeye, Nexon, Tencent, if you don't understand how they buy, then it's a real problem. It's going to kill the deal. Portray value. You want to make sure you portray value properly. You want to know within a range what you want for your business and why you want that, and you can be able to portray that to the buyer. This is why I am worth $50 million. Improper due diligence prep, that can take, if you're not prepared, it can take a long time. Qualifying buyers is critical. Orchestrating all buyers simultaneously is critical as well, and properly. And one of the bigger ones, ego, greed, and arrogance. We all think our company is worth more than maybe it's worth. So get a realistic view of what your company's worth, and don't get a huge ego, or don't get greedy. Some buyers or some sellers that I've seen, they say, okay, I've got an offer on the table for $50 million. If they're going to pay $50 million, they're probably going to pay $75 million. No, they're not. They're going to pay $50 million. If you've got an offer for 50, that's what they're going to be willing to pay. They're not going to up the offer unless, quite possibly, there are other bidders at the table, which is why you have simultaneous buyers at the table. But make sure that you don't get too greedy. So closing thoughts. What percentage of self-managed M&A transactions fail? In other words, try to do it yourself. 80% plus. Right about it now, it's about 90%. Doing it yourself, it just doesn't work. And I've seen it time and time again. Jim, I can sell my own company. I know my business. And I know the buyer. I know the one buyer that's going to buy me. Doesn't work. One of the reasons for using professionals in selling your company, it tells the buyer that you're serious. It also says to the buyer that that they're not the only bidder on the company. And it also says to them, it's wonderful if I buy you, but it's terrible if I don't. One of the key tactics we use in terms of getting the value of a company up is to say to the other 5 buyers there, what if Tencent buys you and the others don't? What if? What is it going to do to your business? What is the average improvement from the first offer to the LOI through a professional process? About 48%. On average, you're going to get 48% more for your company as a result of having that process in place for selling your company. All right, that's it. Any questions? I know we're running a little over time, but we picked up about, probably 15 minutes time. Any questions? Okay, thanks. We're going to have a buyer's panel here shortly. And then we're going to have a seller's panel afterwards. Again, don't forget to vote. The area over there across the hall there is where you can see the indie developers. Don't forget to vote for them. And we're going to have a show and sell, as it's called, here at lunch. So grab your lunch, and it'll be in here. You can see those presentations. Great. Thank you.